Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I am Joe Rockey, here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, one of the things that, first off, I apologize for everyone listening. My voice is off today. I'm coming off of a cold. But one of the things that I am learning now firsthand, and quite frankly, I'm not even totally sure I could have learned this without it being firsthand, is the radical difference between two people from the vantage point of a parent. Like obviously from your friend group and your peers, you can tell these people are different. They have different accents. They look different, blah, blah, blah. We can see all these different things. But I look at my two sons here, and effectively speaking, it's in the most same environment as it could be. Same parents, same house, as much as the sameness as we could be. And even though the younger one isn't even 3 months old, I can see how radically different they already are. And I wanted to talk about that because I think that it's an important illustration that when you look at things that are different between people, oftentimes there's a negative direction that takes. Why can't you be like your brother, or why can't you do this? And it's, in my opinion, oftentimes us putting what we value should be the center of what they value, whether that's real or not. And going through life, I see this problem as an origin of a lot of other problems and schisms that happen in relationships. And I wanted to use that to be the basis of today's conversation, because if we can figure this out about how to not just do the cliche, embrace people's differences, but actually truly accept it, own it, grow with it, I think that a lot of our relationships in this world will be a whole lot better. And I just wanted to start with that as an observation and a starting point with it, because I know it can make a difference. And I know that trying to treat everyone the same way is a problem. So, Father, with that being said, I want to give you the floor and let you take it from there.
Yeah. Trying to treat everyone the same way is a problem. What do they make the difference between equal opportunities and equal outcomes? Something like that. That we want.
I'm not even sure you can be equal in either. To be totally blunt, from a business perspective, I don't think you can.
Well, I guess depending on how you define outcomes. So if outcome is like you have what you need to thrive in your humanity, that's what we want to bring people to. And that, as you say, is going to be different for every person. Every person doesn't need the same things to thrive in their humanity. To become a saint would be the Christian way of saying that. So, yeah, and it's another kind of unresolvable tension is between distributive justice and commutative justice, and one being that in some sense everybody deserves the same, some of the same stuff. In other ways, each needs to be loved according to his own things. And where do you find the balance in those things? There is an unresolvable tension. There's a bit of a paradox in that. And so these are the hard spaces that we live in. And if we try to be too reductive about it and eliminate the complexity, then we end up in a ditch. And I think we have a tendency in our world to move from one ditch to the other ditch. We sort of,
yes.
One could talk about the pendulum swinging. I think probably the ditch analogy is more accurate. So, yeah, learning to love each person, and that's why principles like Catholic social teaching is built on the fundamental principle of the infinite dignity of every human person. So that's the first point. And then how do you support that realistically? Well, then you have things like subsidiarity, where the person closest to the situation makes the decisions as much as possible. Obviously, there are people layers up who need to make decisions, but they shouldn't make more decisions than they need to make. Those who need a broader vision need to make decisions about a broader vision. And so, it's like, whatever, if you have 100 kids and you have to give an allowance. So, then have a middle manager or something who can specialize that across the number of people that are there, or whatever, in an organization, that you try to make those decisions as tailor-made as reasonably possible. Obviously, adding additional overhead at every layer is going to be its own problem that may add unnecessary complexity. So those are all hard things to balance. There's no question about it. But at least, are we aiming at the right thing? Are we aiming at each receiving what he or she needs in order to thrive as much as possible? And that's obviously the gospel message. God communicates his grace in one sense universally. I mean, to everyone, sanctifying grace of baptism, but then to each one in different ways. And he enables the members of the body to function in different ways to make up that mystical body. And the hand is not the eye, is not the mouth, is not the ear. And each member has its role in the body. And that requires taking care of the ear as an ear, and the hand as a hand, and the eye as an eye. And so obviously, like with our physical organs, if we didn't do that, if we started washing out our eye with a Q-tip or something, we'd end up with some problems. So yeah, just using different ways of reinforcing what you're saying, Joe, that if we, and I guess another way to say it is like, how do we keep moving from the transactional to the relational? And again, you have certain transactions. Transactions aren't illegal or immoral or something like that. There are certain things that we treat transactionally, but we want to keep moving towards putting faces on different transactions, treating people like people. And I'm guilty of this in my own ways. I can't deny that. I was in relationship with one person, trying to talk on the phone and care for somebody who's having a struggle, but I also needed to make a stop in a 6-hour drive and grab a couple of things, and then just picking up the items and paying for them without interacting with the human beings that are there. I feel kind of dirty in doing that. And I'm glad that I feel dirty in doing that, and I don't do it. I do it extremely rarely, but I did that. So we're all in a space of having to make some of those judgment calls. I felt that it was going to be better for the person I was on the phone with to not interrupt the phone call so that I could interact with the other people. Anyway, those are the kinds of judgment calls we make. How do we treat people as having an infinite dignity and each being entirely unique, made by God?
And I love those two examples because they show the tension so strongly there. Because one of the underlying things is that we don't have a permanent answer to what we need for life. I mean, you're going to know this from the saint standpoint better than I would, but just from looking at what we value now, was it the same goals and values we had 10 years ago and 10 years before that? And the answer is no, that they obviously shift with age. You have different priorities in which you're trying to come with. And I will have a different set of things that are most important to me 10 years from now. That will be part of life. And maybe they're not priorities in the sense of morals, but priorities in which I'm trying to accomplish throughout the course of the day. And to me, that's one of the challenges of the analogy of which body part are we? Because you get the impression that that's what you're meant to be forever. And I think that that's what adds to the tension of it is, I don't necessarily always be this same part. In this moment in time, I can be part of the outreach and helping people grow with the church, but it doesn't mean I'm always there. I have different needs that shift. And to go full circle to the very beginning, this is why I think that it's impossible to have equal outcomes, because everyone is desiring a different outcome depending upon the various structures, facets of their wants, needs of life. And coming full circle to your conclusion of that with wanting to engage with everyone equally, but knowing that the person you're on the phone with needs more. And then you, as an individual, having this extra self-awareness that says, I feel bad knowing that there's other people that I didn't go out and help. And I'm sure that there's a whole list of motivations and ramifications behind why you feel bad with that. Maybe there's a degree that you feel like I'm representing all clergy, and by me not giving the time of the day, now I've give a sour reason for why they, priests don't care about people. Well, they didn't talk to me when he was here. And I'm not saying you should or do have these feelings, but these are all things that can be within other people, and they'll change over time. I know the person on the phone I'm talking with needs me more, or can have a bigger impact than whatever. And I look at that and say, inherently, I don't think there's anything wrong in any of that. But also, in terms of building a structure, a household, a government, a company, there's no run answer either. And your answer has to constantly be shifting. And now we're running into a whole bunch of other things, like people hating change and people crave consistency, also coming into this tension, basically all to show that this is part of life and it's really hard. Is the step that I wanted to put into there.
Yeah. Yeah, it is the stuff that's really hard. And this is where we're always kind of course correcting a little bit, to using a driving analogy again, we're just always doing little micro adjustments on the wheel, even, let alone if we go off course a little bit. I did that a few times too, driving back from New York. It's not clear which thing you're supposed to take. Even watching Google Maps, there's so many roads intersecting and coming off of, so I went a little too far. I went, the far left instead of the middle left instead of the center left, or whatever. It's like so crazy. Anyway, then I got to course correct, and I got to come back, and I see that I did the wrong thing, but I didn't really see I did the wrong thing until I did the wrong thing, and we've got a lot of that in life. It wasn't obviously wrong. It turned out to be wrong. And so, being able to check in with our hearts, our inner experience of whatever we did, and to be able to say, yeah, that's not right. I'm not going to do that again. And I need to course correct there, or I'm not going to do that again in this circumstance, at least. I need to course correct there. And that's the continual feedback loop that helps us to keep growing towards, again, what are we growing towards? We're growing towards heaven, where we have God-like communion with God and everyone else. And so we can't have that divine communion with everyone else in this life, because we don't even have time to spend 1 second with everyone else. But we are called to have that divine communion with some people, and then emanations out from that. And in some sense, we don't get to choose that. People are brought into our lives. And in another sense, when we do get to choose, Jesus teaches us to choose in a way that's least self-serving, in the sense of going towards those who cannot repay, making a special place for the poor, the marginalized, reaching out to those who don't have anyone or are not interesting to me, or something like that. So he really challenges us not to remain within just a comfortable sphere of relationships, but to push into some of those places. And and then we have some real striking examples of that in the lives of the saints. Everybody knows Saint Teresa of Calcutta for having done that, not having prioritized rich businessmen and national leaders, but prioritizing those that everybody walks past and even spits on, and making them feel like rich businessmen and national leaders. And that's the great reversal of the gospel. So in any event, that that we are really careful about how we see the dignity of others, and that we don't reduce that dignity to money, honor, power, or pleasure, but that we prioritize the dignity that's inherent in every human person, regardless of how much money they have, honor they have, power they have, or pleasure they can give me. And so and again, we're going to not do that quite right. And we should have the humility and the readiness to do some course corrections, to recognize that we should never do what we know is wrong, but within the many potential right choices, we might be able to catch that a little bit after the fact, a little bit better.
Yeah. And, looking at it from different perspectives, one of my jobs is as I guess, in modern lingo, I'm a fractional CEO now. But one of the requirements is to build teams, build operations, build systems that will be beneficial, obviously, for the company. But if you're not helping all the people involved, you're not going to have a company. It's one of my pillars. But knowing how they shift, there's people that when they start, all they care about is, I need to build that big pile of money so I can take care of my family and grow. And then there's other people who are like, I just want the time, like I want to be out of here at 4:00 every day. And how do you build and motivate and incentivize and create structures that are simultaneously giving people what they want? And then this is just from my business context. This is not even, like I said, way harder when you talk about the moral standpoint, because the company still at the end of the day has to do what it says for its clients. It still has to produce and keep track of its words. And how do we build all of these different intricacy questions in play? That's one of the big challenges that I find with life, is that you put 20 people in the room, you're not going to have one goal that everyone has. They might have one goal to win the game, but how they find priority to do that is going to be radically different within their own areas of where they're at in life. And I think that you're calling here to give more attention both to yourself and how you are out portraying to others and what your internal dynamics of prioritizing are, but also being willing to say, this person wants something different than the other, and that's okay. I shouldn't feel bad or wrong because I'm treating this person differently than the other. It's part of the calling and the requirement, as you said in your last answer there. And in some ways, this is something we all do naturally. But if you don't pay attention to it, I think you really come into the standpoint of where you do marginalize, and you only care about those who have the same goal or similar goals of what you have. And you can almost build an opposition towards people who don't feel the same way as you, which again creates all the negative elements of a relationship: strife, anger, misunderstanding, etc. And again, that's why I wanted to bring this up. This might seem like a foundational building block that we don't care about how many cinder blocks are in your foundation. Well, if you're missing one, that wall's going to collapse. And then what happens when the wall collapses to the building above it? So, I think that it's important to spend time here. And with it being one of the foundational things, Father, if you want to bring home this episode.
Yeah, again, I think if we really strive to uphold the infinite dignity of every human person, and then we should feel challenged by that. And especially in those that we find least useful or like the least. And that's where we really call on faith, that we ask Jesus to love in us. That's really what he does. His life is in us through baptism. And we ask him to love in us in ways that we feel are beyond our capacity. And that love will be personalized. Love is always personalized. It's always willing the good of the other, which depends on me knowing the other, the one that I'm loving, the beloved. And so, I think for us to really strive for that kind of holiness, to love as Jesus loves, which we can only do by letting him love in us, and then see what happens from there. We're going to mess it up over and over, then be ready to acknowledge that and correct course and we keep moving closer to holiness.
Beautiful. And we thank everyone for listening, and we will be with you again next week.